Welcome to Drop the Mic. In this week's episode features Brendan Blake, the digital production manager at Spartanburg Methodist College. A little bit about Brendan. He has over 20 years of experience in IT and media production. In this week's episode, we will be talking about social media and its effect on society, as well as its strengths and weaknesses. Check it out. Welcome to the show, Brendan.
Thanks.
It's great to have you here.
Great to be here.
So with social media, it's pretty big these days. You know, we're usually on it every single day. It's part of our lives. But in your own perspective, how would you describe social media's effect on society?
I would say that social media has had a pretty expansive effect on society because it became what we imagined would connect us more, but then through a bunch of different ways, I think it got taken over by just advertising, and now it has confused people because it's no longer designed to connect people. For connection's sake, it's designed to connect people for monetary value, and it's really hard to escape that once that becomes the main driver of any of the stuff that gets put up on the feed.
Now, social media, it's like really, it's more about capitalism nowadays. You know, now that you mentioned that, but there are some good and there's some bad when it comes to social media. On a daily, there's some good or there's some bad when it comes to social media on a daily basis. Who in particular, who exactly is social media affecting when it comes to personal use?
I think that is hard to narrow down into any single group because I think it affects everybody who uses it. I guess that would be the differentiator. But I've seen a lot of the sort of like invention of the technology when it came onto the scene. I was in high school when Facebook was around, but I couldn't access it because I didn't go to college because Facebook started off as a college-only platform to rate faces and stuff. And so I've seen it go from sort of like a question mark to what we assumed was an answer to that question of what is social media and what can it do. But I think that it just raised more questions than it did give us answers. And so I think that every person who interacts with the system is impacted by daily use because it's designed to get you to engage with the system that they're supporting, they're building, they're trying to keep you invested in their ecosystem. And so there's things like internal browsers that get built by these social media companies so that way when you click a link on their platform, you're not leaving their platform. You're staying there. They're capturing all of your movement, all of your interest. And so really what it's doing is you're giving them a good picture of yourself in exchange for what they would say is the convenience of tailored advertising, which in my mind then begs a question, is that actually good or convenient or worthwhile? And I don't have an answer to that question, but I think it's one everybody should consider because it has to do with daily use. Because whether you mean to or not, by engaging with a system that's basically geared and fueled by advertising, then you're just becoming an advertiser yourself. And is that what you want to do with your life? Is that what you want to be known for, is constantly repping your brand? Or do you want to be known as a person who wants to socialize with people, which I think was the intent of social media in the beginning, was to connect groups of people who were separated by distance or time or whatever. And so I think that at the way that it's working now, it hasn't given us any more collective ability to gather. We seem to have lost our ability ever since COVID to do it effectively, even worse now, because we had these things to rely on during the pandemic, which gave us a false sense of connection. And now we're seeing the fallout of that there's no real connection there necessarily. I mean, it can be found in little bits, and that can substantiate you going to, investigate and find further relationship with people. But it's never going to be a stand-in for like face-to-face conversation or just being in the room with somebody. Those things are so important, and I think that what we're realizing now is it's so much more important to be a human than it is to be a data point in a system. And that may be why people are so angry about their privacy being invaded and whatever, because they don't want to be turned just into one of those things. But if the system's built for advertising, then that's going to happen eventually. And I think that's what's happened now. So,
I mean, that literally summits social media nowadays. It used to be, I mean, literally just like you said, like how you said, it used to be about socially interacting with people, but now it's more monetary right now. Now with social media, there's usually some consequences. There's even some health challenges. Well, there's also some challenges along the way. What challenges do people face when it comes to social media? What do you think?
I think that some of the challenges, one of the main challenges I think that everybody, no matter what age they are, faces is exposure to information. It's challenging because I don't think we were intended to be able to see or hear that many things at once or that quickly together. And it's sort of like an old man's argument that, it's too fast and whatever. But like, I really do think that at this point, it's really hard to pay attention because of how short things are getting. And so we've sort of started gearing content creation towards that shorter attention span, which is only fueled by the shorter content. And so it's a vicious cycle that gets perpetuated over and over again. And that's not just the only like element of social media that gets caught up in this cyclical behavior, where this is sort of like why echo chambers are a thing on social media, because it's just the constant repetition of bad viewpoints without any filtering mechanism. And I like to bring up a comparison to social media platforms of the day. Today we have Facebook, there's Instagram, which is owned by Facebook, there's TikTok, there's Snapchat, and then Blue Sky and Twitter. And I think that that's pretty much the main ones. And then there's a bunch of other random ones that get used for various reasons, but those are the main ones. But then there's also Reddit. And Reddit is a social media, but it's different in that it has a mechanism for up and down voting things. And so because you can downvote something, it automatically introduces a second filter that none of the other platforms have. And so instead of just constantly pushing things up to the top, you have the ability to pull things down that don't need to be up there. And through the collective control of the participation, it, in my mind, logically means that there'll be less of a chance of the echo chamber behavior because you have the corrective mechanism. But I've not seen that ever introduced in any other social media platform. And then you see all these news headlines about challenges that come from Facebook and how they did investigations of their own to find the mental health struggles that teens were having and adolescents, and just the enormous amount of comparison that is now going on between people's lives that shouldn't happen. We look at other people, we look at false representations of things, we see so many different symbols that we take to mean real things. And symbols, I mean like people's pictures of them having their family sitting smiling versus the reality of them struggling for an hour just to get everybody together for them to smile. Like, that's a big difference. But what you're showing is just the result of that. And so it's a symbol. It's what you would wish that things could be like, or an idealized version or whatever, but it's not reality. It's not the actual thing that you should be communicating, which is your real life. You're a human. You live, you breathe, and you're different from me because you're not me. And I'd like to know about that. I don't want to know what, you think I want to know because you guessed like an algorithm can guess, because you don't even, people don't understand how those work. I don't. I'm not a mathematician. And it's just, we put so much stock in these things that we don't understand. And it gets to be a little bit like a new mysticism, where we are taking part in these things, and because they're right in front of us, we don't realize that the terminology we use, like algorithm, can easily be equated to spirit or ghost, right? We talk about it in the same way. And so I just think that we've created a false reality, and then we bought into that false reality as if it was supposed to be real. And I'm scratching my head now because I'm like, wait, wasn't it supposed to be false in the first place? Like, it was a synthetic thing. We knew it was created, and yet here we are acting like it was supposed to be natural or whatever. I'm not sure exactly how this would, best be visualized, but social media was never more than an idea, and because we never understood it fully, the idea wasn't realized, as far as I can tell so far. And will it be in the future? Maybe, but that's going to take a lot of work on the platform's part to understand even their place now in the new knowledge economy and how all of that content got fed into these AI algorithms now that are becoming more and more able to have their own agency to then now invade these spaces. And so even more so will this become a false reality, and it's already happening. There's so many AI-generated images, and beyond that, there's AI-generated accounts. And hopefully people know that that's been happening for a long time. But there's plenty of ways that you can automate content creation and posting through bot activity on these platforms. And that's just one way that you can manipulate the algorithm, but also it's a way that you can cause chaos. And it's really just an antagonistic action, as far as I can tell, because why would you want to have mass control over the system like that for any other reason? I don't know. But
When it comes to social media, like you said, it produces a false reality, and to touch on that, it's like you're watching, your favorite content creator, your influencer, you're seeing them live their lives, and you see how successful they are, and that's cool, no, but the thing is, you forget to live your own life.
right. And it's hard because we are living things, and we're supposed to be living. And we spend a lot of time waiting, and then in the waiting is when we fill it with social media. And now I think we've equated that to living now. Oh, well, I'm no longer waiting, but you are still waiting. And I think social media is a good tool for people who need access, but it also needs some sort of temperance with that access, because just having access to all the people doesn't give you the ability to connect with anybody.
Now, in terms of social media, how has it impacted you? Like, I'm pretty sure there are some strengths and weaknesses when you dabbled with social media. Well, how did it impacted you? Did it feel overwhelming to the fact you had a detox? Or did you just understood the game and you just went along with it?
I wouldn't say that I understood it, but like I said earlier, I've been alive to watch it grow. And I've seen all of the different ways that people have dreamed it could turn out. And I still have those in my mind. And I still remember what we were trying to do with it. And so personally, I've never felt overwhelmed by social media because I always understood its place in my life, which is just as an access tool. I need information. Where am I going to get it? The best place to get it would be there. And a practical example of that is I used to use Twitter for news. I don't like news on TV. I never did when I was a kid. It was boring. I have ADHD, so boring equals death to me. If it's boring, I will never engage with it. And so news was just not something I was interested in. And as I grew up, no one gave me any good reason to watch the news because everybody just started to fight about it more. And so I stayed away from it. But then Twitter came along, and Twitter was a essentially 24/7 live access platform to any emergent situation in the world. And so when there would be a uprising in the Middle East, I could go on to Twitter and look at tweets from people who are on the ground there posting chaos. And for me, that was okay because I understood that I was going to find chaos when I went there. For someone else who may not have understood that, that's where the danger comes in. And so it's all about understanding the purpose of your access to it, and then what you could have as a purpose outside of why you initially came. But there's always a specific set of things that you'll be able to do with a platform, and that's where Twitter was limited for me, is just with up-to-the-minute information. Other than that, I don't want to go on Twitter, and now I don't want to go on there at all because the platform got swept up in a media debacle. And it's just insanity now. But there was a time when it was a useful tool, but it only had that limited function for me. And I only ever let it have that limited function. And the same with Facebook. I never relied on it for anything but to have an archive of photos and then to maintain some connections maybe. But I also am of an age group where I was at an age when my parents started using Facebook that it made it not interesting to me anymore. And I just never got really into that platform. I think the only one that I may have been addicted to, or you could say that I have that level of activity on, would be Reddit at this point, but also Instagram, because I'm a visual creator. I make video, I make photos, and I like to post that. And I also have my own personal idea about what I post and why I post what I post. And I try not to post really ever unless I really want to. Like, I don't feel the need to constantly post my experiences unless I would like to share my experience. And it has nothing to do with the fact that I'm sharing it. It's about what I'm doing and how I'm going to capture it and the media itself. I just like the act of creating a video and then putting it out there. And I like that this platform gives me a very fast access to that. But outside of that, it has limited functionality, and so I'm just going to let it go. I don't need it for building friendships because I can do that in real life. I can have a conversation with somebody in real life or help them with their project, and now we're friends. Like, that's how this all starts, right? And so I think that we wouldn't have been able to connect as sharply and as quickly as we did if we had our connection through Teams or in a virtual setting, because you were an intern before. That's how we met. And so if we were working on projects remotely and we never saw each other face to face, we wouldn't be sitting here now, because maybe you wouldn't have even come up with this idea for a project. Well, who even knows? And so I think that social media, personally, in my experience, it's such a wonderful thing if you know how to use it. And that just comes down to wisdom at the end of the day. And there's no surefire way to get wisdom, but patience is involved for sure. And so I think it's taking time to sit and think through your usage maybe every once in a while, and think through, why am I posting all these things? What is it that I hope to get out of this? Am I posting just for the feeling of the engagement, or am I posting because I enjoy posting? And I think that people can sort of reinvent their access in that way by reevaluating what they're even doing. And I think that's a fun way to look at it, because what is the purpose of consistently doing something over and over again the exact same way, especially when it starts to cause issues? Why not change it? And something so new as social media, no one can claim to know anything or everything about this thing. And so why not just goof around with it until it's like actually proven to be poison, and then let's get rid of it. But until that's definitive, then I say let's keep exploring and not be so afraid of it. So,
Some nice words there.
thanks.
With social media, there's been a study that shows the amount of time people spend on social media. The study was that most people spend 2 hours, as much as 2 hours and 30 minutes
Wow.
on social media. So that's like 64%. That's like two-thirds of it's like 2/3 of people like just using social media on a daily basis. Now, in terms of people, regardless of any age group, using social media too much, what can people do to refrain from using it too much?
I think that if people feel that they're using it too much and they would like to detox or go on a sort of like a fast or whatever you want to call it, the first thing that I would recommend is to honestly go outside, to go right outside the door, wherever you are at right now, even, to put your phone down and go, because it's going to start processes in your body that will lead you into comfort, because outside during the day, especially on a nice day, was designed for us, I think. And I think that it's important for humans to enjoy the outside. And once we're out there, we can start listening to things that aren't so repetitive in the way that social media is. And we can listen to birdsong, which is much more repetitive in a pleasant way, or water that sounds very similar over time, but it's the most relaxing sound I think that anyone can think of. Tons of people use white noise to fall asleep now because it sounds like rain. And so I think that if we can just slow down and go outside, those two things would help us a lot, because then we'd start paying attention more to what's happening. And I really do think that people have a sense of urgency that's unnecessary, because we've taken for granted the fact that we can plan and that we can make our schedule. And so I've seen people who have planners that are packed with things for unknown amounts of time in the future. And I just chuckle a little bit because I wonder if those people honestly think that those things are going to unfold how they've planned them, or if they've accounted for the reality, which is that things will change and life is chaotic and that things get disordered sometimes. And it seems better to me to sort of rein in our future focus and to relax in the present. And that's all aided by staying away from social media, because you feel the need and the pressure to be social when you're on there, because you see everybody doing stuff. Oh, well, they went out the other night. Oh, they went to the club. They went to the dinner. They had this. They have their family, their whatever. And all of a sudden it brings in you this desire, and then it makes you want to go and do a bunch of stuff. Whereas if you were able to control that access and limit your exposure with things like patience and time outside, and then all of a sudden you're just engaging with it less, creating the desire less, and doing more desirable things because you want to do these things right now. Because I'm only saying this to people who want to detox, right? If you don't feel you have a problem with social media, enjoy it. But if you feel like you do, then certainly take a step away. And that doesn't mean you have to step away from it every single day or just stop using it altogether. I just mean actively do the thing right now. Because once you do it, it'll be a lot easier to do it again. And then you can go outside again and stop going on Facebook that time. And then it's just about like the small little changes you can do to retrain when you get bored during the day. For me, like I said, I have ADHD, so I have a lot of times where my brain wants to be occupied. I carry fidgets in my pocket, stuff like that. Social media is a perfect fidget, and I understand that. And if that's what it is for people, then certainly use it, but don't feel guilt about it. Just understand it is what it is. It's just another fidget that I could use. And so I think, framing it in the right way too. If you have to use it, thinking about why again, like I said before, examining the reasons why we would engage. Why are we going to even go on here today? Do I want to find out something new, or do I just want to feel good, or do I just want to feel bad? I don't know. It could be anything, but definitely taking a moment to think about it is going to help a lot more than anything else. And then that will also hopefully breed more action through that first step. But especially having ADHD and knowing that if I don't do something almost immediately, I'm not going to do it, I'll procrastinate, I have to just launch onto these things. And I found recently that when I feel the need to do social media, I'll go look at my notes app instead, or I'll go and do something. It's like, you don't even have to stay off your phone. Just don't go on that app. Do something else. So.
Absolutely. Social media, as you said, it can be full of consuming. It can be consuming. You can produce there, but it's like, just don't forget the good times that are out there, the good moments.
Absolutely.
Even the memories you can create outside of the screen as well.
Don't neglect your ability to create things to post on social media. But you have to do that off of social media because nobody wants to see what you're doing on there. You can't do a screen recording of yourself scrolling through your feed unless you want to be like everybody, I guess, on TikTok who's reacting to stuff, which I think that's hilarious. But anyway, that's a whole different conversation.
And to wrap up with this podcast, it's been a pleasure of having you on.
It's been a pleasure to be here.
To the person out there who recognizes that social media is impacting their mental health, where do you suggest that they start?
I think I would just refer back to the idea of just going right outside, because I think doing something like that, splashing yourself with water is another thing. Just doing something to shock your system to get you in a state of redirection. And that is hard, but it's also something that if you can learn how to do it comfortably, then you will have gained a skill that will put you ahead of people in almost any arena. Because the determination to just do something is oftentimes what people are desiring most when it comes to like discipline and practice and trying out things. And I think that that's the thing that people think of most as being affected by like tons of social media use, is you lose time to do all those other productive things. So I've always tried to make sure that if I'm on a social media platform, I'm still doing something productive for myself. And so just going, and maybe that's the first step, is directing your activity towards something that you know is fruitful while you're on there. And that way you haven't wasted that time and you won't feel so bad about it. Or doing something different, you know, shocking yourself out of activity on the platform, switching to something else, switch to a different app, put your phone down, whatever. But I would say definitely doing it quick and try not to think too much about it, because you've recognized that you have something that you'd like to change. And so just see what happens when you change it. See if it makes you feel better. And if not, you can go back to it and have all the social media you like, because it's always going to be there. I don't think it's ever going to go away. But I think that when we control our ability to absorb all of that, it makes it a lot easier to operate in our everyday reality, not feeling so shaken that we're not somewhere else. And it allows you to be present and joyful where you are instead of, you know, wishing and hoping for something else.
Yeah. Well, it's like the end goal is like to not be controlled.
Yeah, I agree. And it can even be a tool in not being controlled, but it has to be used correctly for that. And that takes care and effort and, you know, a focused sort of determination to make that happen. It doesn't just happen on accident. And so it's all about learning how to engage with these things as they evolve, because we are equally evolving along with them. We've only ever been at this point in history with social media right now. And we'll only ever be here for now. And then when we get to where we're going, we'll continue to go. It doesn't stop. And so we can't act like we know a ton of stuff, and we can't act like we can see what's coming either. And so we just got to pay attention to what's happening and figure out how to use that to continue forward without having massive harm, which is what we've seen in some of these platforms, but also with the good stuff too, and highlighting those good elements and focusing people's attention on those. So that way maybe they'll gravitate more towards that type of use.
Absolutely. Those are some wise words, Brendan.
Thanks.
But to the people out there who want to hear more about you, where could they find you? Do you yourself have any social media platforms?
I do.
That can...
I have Instagram, and I post on there a bit. And then I have a YouTube channel. It's WBRNZ TV. It's sort of like a funny little idea I had to make a fake cable access channel that's all just stuff I make, but mostly it's drum covers, and I have some songs on there. But the Spartanburg Methodist College YouTube channel is most of my work at this point, because that's my main gig, is creating content there. And so you can check all those places out. And also, if you're ever around campus, you can come say hi. I'm off campus in my office at the Mayfair Art Studios in Spartanburg, but it's just 5 minutes down the road, so I'm always there.
Absolutely, absolutely. Brendan, it's a pleasure to have you on.
Thanks, Michael.
Great words from you. And that wraps up this episode. I'm your host, Michael User. This is Brendan Blake. Make sure to follow, subscribe, like, comment, share, and I'll see you next time. Take care.